Thank you for watching Creative Backstories. My name is Kendall Brown, creative and entrepreneur. I'm on a mission to inspire others through the power of creativity. Shayla Herndon Edmunds is an entrepreneur and wellness professional who wears multiple hats. She describes herself as a whole, ever-evolving human, wife, mom, coach, founder, CEO, and creative. And that's just the beginning. At her core, she is a healer who helps people awaken, evolve, and thrive by tapping into their own power. Shayla is an amazing woman. Enjoy the conversation. So, Shayla, we're here to talk about your journey as a creative and who you are and how you've moved through the world. I was watching one of the talks that you gave, and you really summed up the work that I'm trying to offer when you said the most important gift that we can give ourselves is to remember who we are. Do you remember you
Mm,
said that?
I do. Yeah, I remember.
Say something
Yeah.
about that.
Mm, there's so much to say about that. The first time that I can remember saying that, I was giving a TED talk and I was grieving.
Mm,
My aunt had transitioned the day before, my
mm,
father several months before, and I thought about canceling. And Spirit said, "Nope, you've got this. We've got
mm,
you." And so before I step out on the stage, I'm in the green room and I just pray, you know, God allow me to be a clear channel, hide me and all my stuff, and just let whatever's supposed to come through come. And so I step out and I give this TED talk that talks about, checking your fingerprints and really finding those things that have always been with you that no one really had to teach you. You just know because you know it. You just gravitate to it because you gravitate to it because those are the breadcrumbs to helping you to get back to or helping you to remember who you
right,
are, because we are socialized in our families and in our culture to have all these ideas and archetypes of who we're supposed to be, and it gets more and more convoluted depending on your religion, your race,
hmm
your gender, um, even your proximity, like where you grow up, all these
right,
things
right.
that, you should, you gotta, and they become these tapes that we play or that I played that told me you need to be one thing. You need to find a job, a career, and pursue it, and
Something
be
secure.
responsible,
Yeah, yeah,
something secure,
yep.
and I was playing those tapes. And then I started to do coaching work. I tell people that I started coaching when I was a teenager and I didn't realize it was a thing. But then as I, continued to mature, I realized that I was working with people who had done the one thing that was secure and they were miserable.
Hmm.
And in their 50s or 60s, they were trying to get back to
Yeah.
something that felt new, but also felt familiar. They were remembering that,
hmm
like, I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't want to be a chief financial officer. I wanted to be a writer.
Yeah, yeah.
And so working with folks I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to work with them, but what I feel like they were was signposts to me that Shayla, remember who you are and find the most, silly and meaningful ways to express it so that you can like enjoy this life, because
Yeah.
how you live this life is your gift back to the creator. And so for me, remembering who I am is, going back and revisiting that little girl who, before she had this voice that would say all the things, she would write all the things. Poetry was my first creative expression, and then that evolved to drawing. It evolved to being in the kitchen and watching my grandmother creating and like cooking being a form of love and expression.
hmm
Seeing and witnessing her also be someone who, I call a healer. She always just had this way of knowing.
Yeah.
and some sort of salve, whether it was physical or otherwise, or words even, to help. And those were things that always just I go back to when I think about like, who am I? And that remembering allowed me to then say, okay, I am this eclectic person who loves poetry, who can geek out with data, who can also do this and do that. And rather than trying to be one thing, how about I just allow myself to embrace all of those things without worrying about whether or not it will allow me to secure the bag, as we
Hmm.
say, but that it allows me to feel like myself. Because many of us, if we're honest, we've spent windows or decades of our lives, though we were doing things that people were celebrating us for, but we didn't feel
Right.
like ourselves.
Right. Right.
So remembering is like knowing what you feel like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and being in that.
Hmm. So much of that resonates with my own journey. You're preaching already, and you've gone through maybe five of my questions already. So so we're definitely on the same page. You talked about the people who you kind of watched as you were figuring it out. Talk to me about who some of your teachers were and what they taught you. What were the lessons that you gleaned from them?
Mm. First and foremost, I don't even know all my teachers. I need to sit down one day and actually do this activity in my journal,
Mm-hmm.
because increasingly I'm realizing the more I get asked questions like this, that I've had so many teachers,
Hmm.
particularly creatives and entrepreneurs. Growing up in the Black community, so many things are just norms to us, or the way that things are and exist, that we don't think of them as creatives or
Right.
role models even. So I think about my cousin Nyla, for example, who, had a beauty salon. She's also very artistic. So I think she is still doing like funeral, um, resource obituaries and things like
Hmm.
that. But she's had
Hmm.
all these different. What I what I love about her journey is that at a very young age, I saw an entrepreneur who was trying new things, taking risks, sort of pivoting and creating something new based on the needs in the community. And it didn't register at that time. But
Right.
now, when I am thinking about how we create, oftentimes we create in response to needs, or to sort of like
Hmm.
articulate something that we're seeing
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
around us. So I think of her, I think of uh, one of the people that I think of and really give a lot of acknowledgement to, for helping me to like walk into my knowing. Because remembering is one thing, walking in the knowing of what you remember
Hmm.
is another, because that
Hmm.
sometimes takes risk, because maybe I'm not showing up the way that I used to. So when I moved to North Carolina, I thought, and that was 18 years ago, I thought, okay, I'm going to, you know, see if I'm interested in becoming a chief financial officer. I'm going to take this job working with one,
Hmm.
and see if this really feels right for me. And I worked with a woman named Nancy Suttonfield, who is still a dear friend to this day. And working in close proximity with her, I got to witness firsthand someone who was highly intellectual and critical thinker, who was also creative. And she saw something in me, and pushed me into my creativity.
Hmm.
And I tell people that sometimes our confidence and our trust in our own ability comes from riding the coattails of other people's belief in
Right.
us. So she was someone that I saw, you know, doing that work, balancing how do I, continue to live my truth, but become more and more of who I am, even though
Hmm.
I'm shedding some things about myself that I once believed. She left higher education and decided that she wanted to create her own way forward and not go back into a traditional position. So she channeled her experience and her ability to really, like, she's brilliant at recruitment and finding the right people with the right energy and the right knowledge. And so she decided to be, to have an executive search firm
Wow.
and to do ad hoc consulting. And, people may not necessarily see that as creative, but when you can figure out like what are the parts of myself that I want to put together in a certain way to present or offer, like that's creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's versus just the rinse and repeat. Um, and then my mom is super creative. I tell people that from my mother, I witnessed her creativity as a makeup artist, as an educator. She is the reason why I still know how to piggyback a hard drive today. But that she was also a single mother, and that requires creativity because she was the essence of making something out of nothing. I
Hmm.
tell people that I love a good financial advisor, but the first ones that I knew were Black women who knew how to make a way out of nowhere,
Hmm.
to get, 5 cents out of a dime. I mean, 5 cents out of a penny, And so those are sort of the day to day, up close and personal role models that I think about. And for me, of course, there are folks that I've always looked up to, like the Oprahs and others.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that they help me to get more into that aspirational place versus the how do you do it place.
Right. Right.
I love this interview that I saw that someone asked Oprah what was next for her or something along those lines. And she said, I'm living in God's dream for me. Oh, wow. You know, that felt,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
see or hear that and I can aspire to, let me set my sights on making sure that that's a part of my experience. But when I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the how do I do that and my models for doing the work, it's very close to home.
Hmm. Hmm. Tell me about the ancestral wisdom that you embody. What what guides you on a daily basis? Those lessons that you learned in your grandmother's kitchen. What
Mm.
when you think about those times, what comes to front of mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is being present.
Hmm.
There was something about, and granted, I was in my grandmother's kitchen at a time when when I was younger, she was still a domestic. So I remember being in the backseat of the car, riding with my grandparents downtown Chatham for her to go to one of those big old white houses, to take
On Main
care
Street.
of
Yeah.
on Main Street. Yeah. And, going to support and care for the families that she was working with. But in the kitchen, she was present. It was her, and I still think about this today because I have her cookbooks. And so that
Hmm.
it's always something to be able to grab a
Yeah.
cookbook and see her handwriting. And that in a moment when she's creating something, if something's a little off, that there's a note to say, not 2 cups here, but three.
Right. Right. Right.
And that that,
they
being,
missed they
yeah,
missed it right here.
right. They missed it right here. This way is better. And that like it taught me about being present because when you're present, you can catch it in the moment to do that.
Hmm.
And that like life is about iterating and that that's a beautiful thing. Um, I also in that kitchen learned to, even though I'm having to relearn it over and over again sometimes, that there's always enough. My grandparents were not wealthy, but I didn't know that.
Right.
Every Sunday, they fed easily over 30 people on a fixed income. There was always enough. What I realized that I learned, from them was this idea of abundance, and that abundance did not necessarily mean material wealth.
Right.
It meant community.
Hmm.
It meant other people having what they needed. So
Hmm.
they weren't full on farmers, but we had a huge garden, and people in the community had vegetables, whether they could pay my grandfather for them or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that being present and being attentive uh, always results in there being enough, even if enough is that I'll know what to do when I get to that juncture.
Mm-hmm.
So I find myself as an adult now going back to that, you know, um, because I did learn some scarcity along the way. I learned,
Mm-hmm.
growing up in a household with a single mom who's trying to make ends meet, that, I experienced the fear of the will ends meet be met,
Mm-hmm.
and but now I find myself increasingly recognizing, okay, am I operating from scarcity or fear? Or am I operating from abundance? Going back to that place where somehow there was always enough. And even realizing that in the times when I was worried about scarcity and there not being enough, somehow, even if it was just in the nick of time,
Yeah.
there always was.
Yeah.
And I think that that helps me a lot as a creative entrepreneur. Uh, yeah, that if they could do it at a time when, or they could believe it and live it and walk it at a time when, you know, um, it wasn't as easy to do so,
Yeah.
then
Limited
yeah,
access to resources. Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Our grandparents were definitely cut from the same cloth. My grandfather had a garden in Danville, and he also had
Mhm.
a garden in the county at my uncle's house, great uncle's home. So he would work in Dan River, get off, work his garden, and then go to check on the other garden. And I'm just amazed because when I get home, all I want to do is sit
Right.
down. And then on Sundays, it wasn't 30 of us, but it could easily be about 10 of us every Sunday who made our way from church to my grandparents' home. And they
Mhm.
fed us every week, with only my grandfather working. It's
Right.
just absolutely amazing.
Right. And our grandfathers are both men who had these prolific reputations and legacies in the
Mm-hmm.
community, because I remember hearing about yours, and depending
Mm-hmm.
on, what room I'm in, if someone realizes that I'm the granddaughter of Edward Herndon, they've got a
Yeah,
story about
yeah.
him. But when I think about what I learned from him, it was about, I think my grandfather was one of the people who taught me about energy and presence in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. So there's one
Mm-hmm.
thing like to be present, that I've got to pay attention to like what's on the stove and not be projecting out into the future.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
these yeast rolls are not going to be
Mm.
rolling, you know. But but my grandfather taught me about like presence, like energy, because he didn't say much,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a way that his countenance and his presence, so like you knew everything that he meant without him saying a word.
Right.
And so when I hear people talking about how in his presence they felt like they needed to sit up straight,
Mm-hmm.
or they felt safe, or they felt like there was an expectation for them to behave, or
Right.
to remember who they are, to act
Yeah.
like they know something, that he did that without fussing, without saying much at all. But his
Bravado. Yeah.
energy was
Yeah.
so strong, his presence was so powerful that you knew he didn't need words.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're talking about my uncle, Thurman, whose named
Yes.
for my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather. So yes, uh, he's my uncle is the lion of our family, and just an incredible legacy that he's demonstrated to our family. So um,
Yeah.
let's shift a little bit to talk about your creative process. How did you move into owning this, what you wanted to do with what was in your hands? What were some of the things that led you to be able to say, I'm going to do this, not I want to do this, but I'm going to do this. Like, how did you put those pieces in place?
Yeah. So when I first started, oh my goodness, Wellness Bar, my very first product was our Whipped Shea Body Butter.
Hmm.
And I created that product because I had a little one, years before who had eczema, and I was frustrated by the doctors recommending eczema creams and steroids that were actually, giving him hyperpigmentation and just
Hmm.
creating other issues. And as a mama bear, I'm thinking about like, how is what I'm choosing for him setting the standard for what he'll know to be right for himself? So there was a
Right.
bit of a feeling a type of way about
Hmm.
going and filling that prescription. And so I remember thinking, well, what would my grandma do?
Hmm.
And Irma would have made something, Nancy would have made something. And
Yeah.
so I started to research ingredients and figure out like what are his triggers. And so I could craft something that I knew would be healthy for him and then just figure out, perfect it as I went. And once I had done that, I started to also allow friends and family to try it out. And everyone was like, you need to sell this.
Hmm.
And, at that juncture, I think that I was a mom too. So I'm thinking, I don't need anything else to do. Y'all, I think
Right.
I'm good on jobs, responsibilities, all of that. But then, after a while, I think I started to not brush off those suggestions and those requests. I realized that as someone who also is very much into herbalism and my own remedies, that the things that I was doing to support and care for my family were at risk of being lost within our culture and community,
Hmm.
and also very needed for others. And that body butter was becoming a way for me to talk with folks about their diet and, are they advocating for themselves with their providers? And
Right.
I thought, maybe this is a pathway into creating more conversations and really allowing me to not just have the conversations with folks, but to build a wellness empire or practice that
Hmm.
also gives people a place to go.
Hmm.
And then I started to do research and looked at, in the personal care space, the amount of money that Black women in particular are spending on care products with we spend about $8 billion a year, and less than 25% of those products are non toxic.
Mm.
And so that just quite frankly pissed me off. So
Yeah.
part of my launch was resistance that, I remember being a little girl going into Hills and, department store with my mama, and we had a section on the aisle. And that at that time, over 20 years later, we had made our way to an end cap. And it just made me mad,
Hmm.
And so there was a like, are you going to be a part of a solution?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was what propelled me to start that business. And it really started organically with me, taking some money and buying ingredients and designing my own label and starting to put it out there with friends and family and expanding. And, what I didn't realize was happening in parallel was that my husband was sort of awakening to remembering who he was. And he was
Mm.
working in manufacturing and miserable on the path to being a plant manager and stressed out.
Hmm.
And right before our youngest child was born, he quit his job and went to school to become a licensed massage therapist. And
Wow.
once he'd done that, we were like, well, these two things really go nicely together.
Hmm.
So, as we evolve, let's evolve into a brick and mortar where you can start our service element of our practice, and I can continue to grow our manufacturing arm, and let's just see how this evolves.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was 9 years ago.
Wow.
And we have weathered a pandemic, you
Hmm.
know, introduced a whole new human being into the world. And it's been, incredible to also see how both of us finding our way and sort of following that internal compass has been a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. That's beautiful that you were able to do that together. It's not common that
It's not.
yeah, that spouses are able to be on that same path and have a hand to hold while they're doing it. Yeah.
It's not, and people are often like, you work with your spouse and y'all are good? And I'm like, yes. But I think that it works because we respect each other's creativity. Like I
Mm-hmm.
respect the fact that there is a place that he goes during a massage that allows him to intuitively know what his client needs,
Mm-hmm.
and help them.
Yeah.
And that is not my gifting.
Mm-hmm.
However, whether it's coaching or creating a product that is inspired by something that we continuously see with clients. So, right now I'm working on, some products to help people who experience chronic pain because we see that with so many of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
That is my lane, that I
Mm-hmm.
know there's something I need to solve for. Is it going to be through a tincture? Is it going to be through a tea or a body butter or something else?
Yeah.
So we respect that our creativity shows up differently and that is a part of the beauty of our work, and we don't need to compete.
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
it's not a competition. It is fully a collaboration.
Oh, just want to say if we get any breaks or buffering that we can edit that out. Um, and
Okay.
the beauty of Riverside is that it downloads your video to your hard drive, and then once it's done, it uploads it to the cloud. So
Ah,
it takes out all of the buffering. So
that's cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so tell me about your creative process and what that looks like in terms of, um, you know, well, I'll preface it by asking this. So, as a multi hyphenate, as a person who is gifted in so many different ways, your yes is important, but
hmm
also your no.
hmm Yes.
How have you navigated saying no to some things that you are good at that bring a sense of security, um,
hmm
but just don't bring you deep joy and satisfaction? How have you navigated those waters, or how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am definitely still in process with that.
Hmm.
First I've learned through not saying no.
Hmm.
So what I
Say that. That will teach
right.
you.
My no's have taught me a whole lot. But first of all, it's taught me to understand what a no feels like in my spirit.
Hmm.
Because when I think about the times that I said yes when I was supposed to say no, I had a hunch, something in my spirit or my intuition, gut or whatever folks call it, was saying, mm-mm.
Hmm.
And I thought about, okay, but it's just going to take this amount of time, or this is how much they're going to pay me. And I convinced myself to say yes.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting the work and
Just
I'm
this one
like,
time. Just this one time.
right, just this one time. And then I'm in the work and it's just like it's either dragging or I feel like I'm having to constantly reground and center myself because whether it's drama with the client and part of my work, my other business is doing consulting work. So that's
Hmm.
where the yeses and nos are really, really, really important.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll get in it and I'll realize you knew from the start
Yeah.
that you weren't supposed to do this. You felt that no. You didn't honor that no. So I've had to learn to actually understand like what does a no feel like and what does it sound like?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because then when someone approaches me with something, like I hear the no, and I can say, okay, Shayla, you heard that no. Like if you're
Right.
gonna do something different, like you're going in with eyes wide open.
It's
Or does
on
that
you.
mean that you're renegotiating because there's something that you're picking up on that
Yeah.
you need to address or sort of account for? So like saying those yeses that should have been nos was actually really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now if something does not feel in alignment with who I am, sometimes as someone who does strategy work and diversity work, and that's one of my creative endeavors, I can sort of feel when people are not authentic or genuine about the work that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or when it comes to my wellness work, sometimes people don't really want to be well. They just want they want a coach who'll give them the answers. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to work with people. I'm supposed to work with people who want to do the work, but maybe they need someone to help them to hold themselves accountable or to learn to reframe. And so if I sense that maybe they're not ready or genuine, or that I'm not the person for the work, I do a lot of referrals because people approach me for great work and I feel like, this is great. It's just not my job.
Right.
It's not
Right.
my opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I did that in the past, before I left higher education, I was offered 3 jobs back to back. One that they even allowed me to create the position description for. And then when I meditated on it, I heard very clearly, that's not for you, it's for someone else. So in terms of process, I meditate on the opportunity. I ask spirit, is this in alignment? And I get quiet so I can actually like feel into the opportunity versus just looking at the logistics and the financial benefit. The
Mm-hmm.
financial part can't come first for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because so many opportunities that I've had that may not have been the most financially exciting have led to other opportunities that have been. So I've definitely learned that the yeses and nos help you to if you're saying yes so often, then you're chasing the bag.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make sure that you have some intentional no's along the way, you're starting to learn that the resources and the opportunities will come
Mm-hmm.
because you're being intentional about where you are showing up and giving your time and talent and treasure. And that just can't be everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not sustainable.
You said something really important, that it's not always yes or no, but it's sometimes an
Hmm.
opportunity to renegotiate and to perhaps take some things off the table that won't serve you or that you just have no desire to do those tasks. And that's really helpful because we're kind of socialized to be very black and white when it comes to many of these kinds of decisions. So that's really helpful and something that I've had to learn how to do, and something that I'm still learning how to do, is that it's not always either or, but you can
Right.
go back and
Same
say,
here.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And sometimes your no will be said for you because you
yeah.
actually value your time and your work enough that your
Exactly.
price is right.
Yeah.
Because people who will value it will also pay your price. So there are many
Hmm.
people who have said no to themselves because I've sent them the quote. But there was a time when I was worried, will they say no if I tell them my price? Well,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
should say no if they don't
Right,
like the price,
right,
That's
right.
okay. You can't, you can't set your prices or, establish your value based on who won't pay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because if you do, you'll say a lot of yeses and do a lot of things for people who you already know don't value or are not ready to or able to value your time and your treasure.
Exactly, exactly. Talk to me about, you mentioned things that ground you. What are some of your grounding rituals? You mentioned meditation.
Hmm.
What's a day? I know that your mom, your partner, your boss, CEO, you're doing things, but on a day when you have some control over your day, what what do you spend your time doing? What does your morning look like?
Hmm. So most mornings it looks like getting up around 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I like to be up before everyone in the house so that I have at least an hour of
Same.
quiet time.
Yeah.
2 to 3 days a week, it's being up at 4:45 because I've got to go to the gym and I have a trainer because I need someone to hold me accountable that she's there and she's going to charge me whether I show up or not. Um, but for the days that I'm not going to the gym, I like to spend at least 5 minutes before I let my feet touch the ground. I scan my body, meaning I start at the top of my head and I just slowly allow my awareness to float from head to toe. And I set my intentions for the day.
Mm.
If I have a busy day ahead, then I may visualize the day, like do a preview of the day. So I'm visualizing my first Zoom. I'm visualizing walking into a client meeting and seeing smiles or, whatever I hope to see there. So I'm big on visualizing the day ahead and really easing into my day. I'll meditate after I get up and shower and just have a little bit more quiet time. My rule for myself is that at the very minimum, if I can't consistently give myself 5 minutes, then I need help.
Mm.
Whether that is that I need, to talk to my therapist because I'm not even giving me 5 minutes, you know. So I use that also sort of as like my baseline of commitment to myself. And then, Curtis and I divide and conquer with the shuffling of kids in the morning.
Yeah.
So my part of that is taking my oldest kids to school and they're high schoolers. So just the practice of driving them to school, talking with them, being mindful of like what music is playing and making sure that my energy is such that their first 30 minutes of the day or the drive to school is helping them to feel calmed and grounded. They laugh at me because I always have meditation music playing, so much so that sometimes I'm in the grocery store and I'm like, they're playing my meditation music. No, honey, you playing your meditation music. You're just hearing it come out of your pocketbook. But I really am big on making sure that I'm constantly creating an environment around me that feels soothing. So whether it's that you come to my business or my office at home, you're gonna like the lights are not bright. There's gonna be a Himalayan
Thank
salt
you.
lamp or
Thank
two.
you. Yeah, I have
you
light
know,
sensitivity. So thank
yeah,
you.
me too. So I move through my day with that. Even as I'm going to visit a client, I'm getting there a little early. I'll have clients do breath work before
Mm,
we start a session, even if
mm,
it's a corporate client, and so I bring the things that help me ground into the work that I'm doing with others because I know that usually our energy is so scattered because we've got so many things on our minds that most of us just need let's take three deep cleansing breaths,
exactly. Yeah.
and come back into our bodies.
hmm
So I'm doing that throughout the day.
Yeah.
Um, and, as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I'm still figuring out or really intentional about figuring out is how to make sure that I do feel like I have some control over my schedule, so
hmm
that unlike when I was working a 9 to 5 and it's just like, I've got to say yes to that meeting. If there's a day when I know I don't have it, I'll rearrange some things unapologetically.
hmm
There was times where I felt like I couldn't do that because I didn't want a client to feel a type of way. And then I realized, no, my clients actually want the best version of me.
hmm
Capitalism and, some of the things that we have been influenced by will tell us I've got to be perfect or I've got to perform being okay. Well, when I'm not, I'm just not.
hmm
And so that means that during the course of the week, if I need to make adjustments, I do. Generally, I don't have meetings with clients on Mondays and Fridays, which makes it easy for me to do something fun that I want to do, like sit down and have this conversation with you. So I'm big on protecting my time
hmm
because that's how I
I love
protect
it.
my energy. And I do not inundate myself with meetings. I've got a 3 meeting a day rule. And after that, it's got to be a real important reason why I'm talking to somebody else. Because I know that as an introvert, my energy dwindles with each exchange, and I need a
hmm
moment to charge back up. So
Yeah.
those are, that's sort of the day in the life. I am still a, cook a couple of times a week type of gal because I love to
Hmm.
cook. And that's one of the ways that I ground myself is through good food and being able to cook with my children.
What's your favorite
And
thing to
then
cook?
oh my gosh, that's so
You
hard,
mentioned
Kendall.
food, and I have to veer off a little bit.
Yeah,
And
because I love food so much, Kendall. It is
same.
hard to just say I love savory things.
Hmm.
So most recently, I learned to make crepes.
Oh,
There's a cafe here that makes amazing crepes, and I was just like, you know what? Usually, if I find a food that's great, intuitively or instinctively, I want to learn how to make it.
same.
But anything that's savory, I love vegetables. I've got a garden, so that is also a part of my daily routine, being in the
Yeah.
garden. That's where a lot of my creative ideas come from. So if I'm
Hmm.
fixing or solving for something, usually the epiphany comes in the garden.
Mm.
But if I had to name one thing that I love to make, I'm gonna say like around the holidays, I love making a good prime rib roast,
Mm.
bone in, the rosemary and the garlic. Yes. Yeah, that's a favorite.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. My dad loved prime rib. Yeah. Thanks for indulging me on a food journey. Yeah, I listen to food podcasts. I'm constantly thinking about my grandmother's influence on my life and the food ways of the Danville region. Just impacted me in
Yes.
so many ways. I know what vegetables are supposed to taste like, and that's not a testimony that many people have. These days, they don't know what an heirloom tomato really tasted like,
Mm,
years ago, and what chicken tasted like years ago. It tastes nothing like it does now. So
right.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. And I've got heirloom tomatoes growing in my garden.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So just a few more minutes here. What is your superpower? And she laughs.
I laugh because I think I just came to this realization in the last
Uh-huh.
24 hours.
Oh wow.
My superpower is facilitation.
Hmm.
And I realized that, and you can also think of, another way of saying it is energy work.
Hmm.
But my ability to facilitate individuals and groups through their experience and their emotions, and whatever's coming up for them is something that I am really good at. It's a way that my creativity shows up that sometimes I take for granted,
Hmm.
that because there's nothing that you can necessarily do in advance to plan out moving a
Hmm.
group from here to here because you don't know what energy, what attitudes, what people are bringing into the room. You
Right,
really got to
right.
be able to connect with people on a deeper level, whether that is if I'm doing an energy work session with a Reiki client or I am leading a board retreat. Like I've got to be able to plug in to facilitate, and sometimes that facilitation means I've got to create space for people to release things
Hmm.
that they've been holding, to open themselves up to things that maybe they're being invited in. And there are times when I don't think I'm facilitating, but I am facilitating. That's why I think it's my superpower because I'm realizing that it's happening even when I'm not trying to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. That's rich. How did you realize that? What led to that epiphany? You mentioned that
Earlier
it's recent.
I've had
Yeah.
a couple of, right now I'm working with a couple of nonprofits, and one of them is really small, very grassroots, and one of them is, a well established 100+ year old organization. And then I've had some individual client sessions. And I remember preparing for each of them. And, I've got my slides and all the things that you're
Hmm.
supposed to have. I've done my meditation, I'm grounded. And then in each instance, I'm in front of the room and I just have this clear impression of something that I'm supposed to say
Hmm.
and or have them do. And when I'm obedient and I do
Yeah.
that, I feel something shift in the room. And so that happened several times in different ways this week. And I think that on some level, I've been asking spirit, like, what is my superpower? I may not have used your words, but I think I've also been asking for the answer to that question. And so being the observing how in practice there are consistently times when I know or am given insight into what to say or to do, and that I can feel the difference that it creates or what it makes possible in the room.
Hmm.
Um, that's how I came to it. But I'm yeah, still evolving there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know just from watching your engagement on social media and the ways in which folks have responded to the work that you're doing that it is indeed something that is a gift. And I'm so grateful for our connection and grateful for,
Likewise.
yeah, I'm grateful for all of the rivers and the streams that have led our paths to cross. And I'm our unofficial family historian. So I've taken that from my Uncle Thurman.
Uh-huh.
And so I know that your grandmother was a Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
my grandfather's mother was a Fitzgerald, I think.
Okay.
So all of the Fitzgeralds in Danville, Chatham, Java are related. They come
Are
from the
connected.
same, yeah, they come from the same
Mm-hmm.
place. So I know that there's a connection there. So that's always been in the back of my mind to research. So one day
Yeah.
I'll get some names from you and match them up with our family tree and see where they overlap.
I would love that. I actually sometime last year, because that particular arm of my family tree has been, you talked about inspiration or influences on me
Hmm.
creatively. That's the ancestral influence that's been coming through the most over the last couple of years.
Hmm.
From dreams about my grandfather that I never met,
Yeah.
to or great grandfather that I never met, on that side of the family. So I would love to explore what the connections are. And Carice, who is a local historian and genealogist,
Yes, I've
has helped
been.
me with that. So I'll
Yeah.
share what she shared with me because, of course, her skills go deeper than my ancestry clicking can do.
I need to connect with her because there's some brick walls that I've run up against that I need some help with that are beyond my expertise. So yeah,
Wow. Well, I will definitely forward it along. Hopefully, what she found for me can be beneficial in your search, but she's an incredible resource.
yeah, yeah. All of those Fitzgeralds from there's a cemetery at Shaco Baptist Church, and there's a cemetery at Riceville Baptist Church where a lot of the Fitzgeralds are buried. So yeah,
I
I want to
missed
do
that
some
part. Say that
research.
again.
There's a cemetery at Shaco Baptist,
Ah.
and there's a cemetery at
Mm-hmm.
Riceville Baptist, where a lot of the Fitzgeralds are buried. So I want to do some
Yes.
research there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
I think both of my great grandparents are in the Shaco,
Hmm.
the primary one that's right at the church, and then I think there's one that's a few miles away.
Yeah,
Um, they're buried there.
that's
Yeah.
where they are. That's where they are. So as we come to a close, I could go on. I really could, but I want to honor your time. Is there something that you would offer, leave with someone who is feeling stuck, someone who wants to, someone who's feeling an inkling to explore and embrace a creative path and remember, which is the powerful way that we started, remembering who we are. What would you offer? Is there anything that you might offer to that person today?
It's interesting because just before I hopped on with you, I was doing energy healing session with someone who is at that place of
Hmm.
feeling stuck with their creativity. And what I notice is a pattern is that people who describe themselves as feeling stuck are oftentimes trying to figure out the right thing to do. And that's what has them stuck, is feeling like there's a right or wrong versus
Mm.
just allowing themselves to explore. I remember telling her to sort of reclaim that version of herself, the little girl who existed before she was socialized to think about, being nice
Yeah.
or playing it safe, all the things that, we're told that are well intentioned, but really, make us risk averse, make us
Hmm.
focus so much on getting it right versus just exploring and seeing what happens. And so, I reminded her that that version of ourselves before all those tapes started playing would just explore, would find mud and then think of water and suddenly
Hmm.
be making something out of it that either we loved or we didn't. And either
Yeah.
we did it
Yeah.
again or we did not. And that was like the simplicity of the
Yeah.
process. And so
Stealing
I
grandma
think that,
in pans to make
right,
mud pies.
right, finding whatever you could, so if you're
Yeah.
thinking about creativity and you're working and you're worried about resources, maybe you're not ready for, when I started my business, I had my little 4-quart KitchenAid mixer.
Hmm.
We have a much bigger mixer now, but I
Yeah.
started with what I had, and I allow it to be playful. So if
Hmm.
you are feeling stuck creatively, you need to play. Even
Yeah.
if it means that you need to go to the literal playground and get yourself on a swing, out of the rat race and just into a place that supports your creativity. Go
Yeah.
where go where a kid would want to go.
Hmm. Hmm.
Go, in a safe way, observe children. um,
Yeah.
and start there and just, get in the vicinity of
Hmm.
people who are being creative. Um, I think that that's an important place to start, and then just try. You know,
Yeah.
as we do that, I believe that we get more insight and more confidence, and we're directing our energy towards being creative.
Hmm.
We're directing our thoughts towards being creative. Wherever your thoughts go, your energy flows. But if you're
Hmm.
thinking about getting it wrong, if you're
Yeah.
thinking about, well, what's the best way, you're going to stay stuck.
Yeah.
And creativity is not about knowing per se, it's about doing. It's
Yeah.
about exploring and allowing the knowing to come from what emerges from that.
Hmm. Hmm. So powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And
Thank
lastly,
you.
tell folks how to connect with you and how
Sure.
to research your beautiful products and support your endeavors.
Thank you. So, for anyone who would like to connect or follow and engage in any way, the way to find me is at coachshayla.com, CoachShayla, spelled the way that it sounds.com. That gives you a pathway to all of my businesses and practices. If you're interested in products, Oh My Goodness Wellness Bar is where you can find us. And we are OMG Wellness Bar on all the social media platforms except X. We do not hang out over there, but you can also find us at omgwellnessbar.com. Thank you for listening in.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Shayla. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time and our conversation. Thank you again for carving
Me
out
too.
time to chat with me.